Welcome to the Holiday Podcast, where we usually sit over homemade challah on Friday afternoons and talk about the intersections of the Old and New Covenant. I'm your host, Tammy, priest, a Jewish follower of Jesus, and it's great to be with you today for a really quick visit. So I actually did not make challah today because today is my daughter's birthday, and I used up all my baking time making a matcha green tea drip cake. It was my first foray into drip cakes, and it's definitely not ready for the Food Network, but it should taste good. Anyway, as we talk about starting a new year, thinking about birthdays, there was a really special holiday this past week on Wednesday, and it's called Simchat Torah, or Rejoicing of the Torah, and it's a day filled with worship and dancing and celebrating and singing as congregations finish the annual reading of the Torah and roll the scroll back to the beginning, back to Genesis. Now, I shared all about Simchat Torah last year in the episode called Roll Back the Scroll, and I'm going to repost that this weekend because I just realized a little while ago that it was one of the casualties of last fall's hack and deletion of all my Instagram accounts, which is a different story. But in a nutshell, like I said, Simchat Torah is a day of celebrating God's Word. And we roll the Torah scroll like this one, which I got at my bat mitzvah in Israel, from the end of Deuteronomy back to the first chapter of Genesis. And a really cool thing about this passage for me, Genesis 1, is that it's the passage that I expounded on during my bat mitzvah ceremony at home. I'm in my home synagogue when I was 13. And it's definitely been interesting to look back and read what my 13-year-old self thought about the application of this passage. But as an adult and as a Jewish believer, looking back, what's really struck me is that for my whole life, and for pretty much every teaching I've heard, the focus has been on the mechanics of creation, what things in what order, and the majesty of it all, which is good and right. But when I started teaching on Esther a while ago, my gaze shifted from what God did to why he did it. And so let me tell you about why Esther got me focused on creation. It's that throughout the whole book of Esther, there is discussion of love, chesed, love. So many Jewish commentators call chesed one of the most important words in the scriptures. It has so many facets to it that it's impossible to translate simply. Different translations call it different things: favor, kindness, loving kindness, mercy, approval, benevolence, beauty. The list goes on because it's one of those Hebrew words that's almost impossible to translate into English. And the reason that chesed is one of the most important words in the Old Testament, the most important, according to some Jewish commentators, is because God uses it to describe himself. So let me read this passage to you. It's probably familiar, from Exodus 34. Adonai descended in the cloud, stood with him there, and pronounced the name of Adonai. Adonai passed before him, Moses, and proclaimed, the Lord is God, merciful and compassionate, slow to anger, rich in grace and truth, showing grace to the 1,000th generation, forgiving offenses, crimes, and sins, rich in grace and truth. Many translations say abounding in love, abounding in chesed. That's the Hebrew word there. And this specific phrase in this passage is used 8 times in the Old Testament, always to describe God, either him describing himself or others describing him. So if we remember all those things that chesed, favor, means, it tells us that God is abounding in kindness and loving kindness and goodness and approval and loyalty and mercy and grace and faithfulness and devotion, all those things. And this word doesn't just extend on and on with different meanings, because by definition, chesed goes deep. There's a sense of persistence and zeal to it. And so that's what brings me back to sharing with you about creation. So Judaism teaches that because of this unrelenting, pursuing nature of chesed, God's chesed is the very reason for creation itself. That because God is abounding in chesed, overflowing with it, He created the world just to have people on whom to pour out His love and His favor. Just to have people to love and pursue unconditionally, us. So today, on this Sabbath Eve, I thought it would be a powerful thing for us to really contemplate the why of creation. To ponder, even picture in our minds that God, our Creator, created this universe and each one of us in it out of an overflow of His chesed love. That He couldn't contain His kindness and mercy and love and beauty and faithfulness and loyalty, all those things. He couldn't contain them because God is love. He is chesed. And so all of these things flow from Him as He created and now pursues unconditionally. And I pray that this reality would really overwhelm us. I know it overwhelms me when I really stop to think about it. And so I encourage all of us to take time to consider what it would look like if we each lived our lives in this same way. That chesed love, kindness and mercy and faithfulness and loyalty, all those things would be the overflow of our lives. And that we would think about what that tangibly would look like. How we might live and act differently as we ponder and pursue the one who poured all of His chesed out for us on the cross. So peace and chesed to you on this Challah day.